So I am here today with Theresa, and she is a student of mine who just recently passed her Praxis Middle School Math 5164. So we're going to chat with Theresa today, and this is all in my series on Praxis success stories. So hello, Theresa.
Hi,
And
Robin.
if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about you and your experience. And
Sure.
I will have to say that Theresa is in Europe, and we have a 6-hour time difference. So
Yeah.
it has been fun to be able to catch back up with her. So go ahead, Theresa. I'll let you
Okay.
take the
So
stage.
I think I have a very different path than a lot of people that are coming to you for passing this test, right? Because I'm a somewhat older, and I'm not going to say how many years, but it's significant. And I in the past 2 years, I really came to the understanding, or I guess the realization, what my passion has been, for a very long time. And I learned that out of stepping in as a long-term substitute at our high school here aboard the Army base in Stuttgart, Germany. And I first stepped in as a long-term sub for geometry. And then I stepped in as a long-term sub for Algebra 2. And what I found was that I never felt like I was going to work, and that I just loved what I was doing. And so that's when I decided to pursue, might as well get a certificate in teaching. And the first step there, for me was to pass that 5164, because it would be a good practice for me to pass the 5165, because I stepped into both of those classes really not looking at any of that content for a really long time, other than to help my kids along the way. So I came to you with a lot of doubts and a lot of questions, even after stepping into geometry and algebra 2. So
Yes, and you had said you were teaching those courses, so you were
yes,
really comfortable with that material when you took your middle school
it
math
helped.
classes. Now, would you say a lot of the test had that content on there so that you were really comfortable with that? Like, what level was the middle school 5164 test material compared to like what you were usually used to teaching?
Right. So I was very surprised. I have a son in 8th grade. Now, granted, he just moved over to the American school from German schools after 8 years. So I've been kind of watching where he is with his math at the American school. I was very surprised at the level of functions that were on this test, but I was proficient in functions more than any other category, I think. I'd have to go back and look, but I think I did better in functions than anything.
Yeah, I
Um,
remember your score being really high in functions, I think,
yeah,
whenever
I
you
think I
had sent
missed
them to me.
one or something like
Yeah.
that. But that was after, a full year in algebra 2, where you're very functions driven. Everything you do is related to functions almost in algebra 2. And that test, I was very happy that the 5164 was so focused on functions. Um, so yeah, it had a lot of algebra 2 in it for sure.
Yeah, your functions was, yeah, you missed 1 point in the functions. That's it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah, you did really, really well. You did really well in all the categories. Your task of teaching questions were really
The
high
worst.
too. But
That
no,
was the worst I did.
you did good.
Yeah.
Now back to the functions. What would you say that they asked you in terms of functions? Was it like, is this a function and you had to do the vertical line test? Was it domain and range? Was it matching graphs and their functions, or matching graphs and their equations? Or how would you say the function problems? Because that's probably the most asked question I get, was that my students struggle in algebra and functions. So you really have a great handle on both of those topics. So could you tell us a little bit about what type of questions the test is asking in those categories?
Yeah, I mean it's been several weeks, so it's been about a month now, right?
Yes.
Maybe about a month. So yes, everything that you need to know about functions was on that test. If, you know, as far as like finding the perpendicular line to, you know, any given, you know, linear function, find that perpendicular line, make sure you know how to do that. Make sure that you can find the zeros, make sure that you can match a graph to this function. Also, there were also questions that had the function in a different you know, set. So like it had the slope intercept, and then it had
Did it have point slope form?
It had point slope form.
Standard form?
It did not have standard
Not
form.
standard form. Okay.
But I just, and that was something that I really reviewed heavily before the test, because, you know, we don't use all of those forms a lot. Like we all kind of gravitate towards one or another. And then, you know, I needed to make sure I knew what H and K was, you know, what do those letters represent? So yeah, everything to do with functions, I would say study everything regarding functions.
Now, did you use your graphing calculator to graph your functions to check it
Every
against
time.
the test every time? Okay. So I know
Yes.
we had gone over that a lot in our study sessions about the graphing calculator. And I have students that say they use the graphing calculator the entire time, or they wait until the very end. So can you kind of share your process of how you used your graphing calculator in the test as well, if those function questions were one of the more, you know, heavily part of the test that you like definitely use your calculator on?
I probably, and that's probably where I need to work harder at not wasting so much time, but I use the calculator for any problem that I could check the answer. And so I was flipping, you know, from my screen over to the calculator, which takes time. And I did end up running out of time on my test, but that was also because I was testing at home and I had 2 incidents that happened at home. So I'm so happy my test wasn't canceled, because it very well could have been.
What happened?
Well, so in the, I must have been 20 or 30 minutes into my test, and I got a message that said your test is being canceled because WhatsApp is running in the background of your computer, which I had shut everything down. Nothing was running.
Oh
And
no,
so,
I've never even heard of that before.
oh my
Okay, so
gosh,
it was like a computer program running in the back that they thought was running, but you were like, no, it's not running.
It's not running. And I even so I raised my hand, and the proctor came on, and I told her what happened, and she said, okay, well, just go ahead and shut down your computer, restart your computer. And I did that. And she goes, and then log back on. And I thought, I'm gonna have to start all over. Like, I was already exhausted at 30 minutes in, right? Like I was already, I think it was actually later than 30 minutes. It was, and that kind of really worried me. And then my daughter was downstairs, and I told her, I'm like, I set her up with a movie, and, you know, like, do not even breathe. And
yeah, don't make a word.
Yes. I'm like,
no sounds, no words.
Yeah,
no moms,
you need
nothing.
something, you like, I'm not here. And she was using my AirPods downstairs in my bedroom. Well, they kept trying to connect to my computer. So up at the top of my screen, I kept getting a pop-up that said my AirPods were trying to connect. And I was it paranoid me, because I'd heard other people on your Facebook page talk about how they'd get a pop-up and then their test was canceled. So I was super distracted during a certain part of my test. And so I again raised my hand, and I told her what's popping up on my computer. And she's like, it's okay, just don't click on it, you know? And I'm like,
okay.
I'm not, I showed her, I'm like, I'm not wearing any AirPods. My daughter's downstairs. So I had 2 big incidents that really like knocked me off my rocker. And so I was really surprised when I passed.
Yeah, you did a great job. And I mean, I guess that's one of the things that if you also want to share like maybe your strategy for not kind of like letting the test go to the point where you're like, well, I'm not going to pass anyway, so no big deal. Like, what was your strategy for like continuing the test, even though you had all these incidences happen where you had, your WhatsApp running in the background when it wasn't, and you raise your hand, you ask your proctor, and then your AirPod pop up? Like, how did you continue to go forth with your test without having like that mentality of like just kind of giving up? Like, how did you persevere in
It
your
was
test
hard.
taking?
It's hard. Like, I remember other people mentioning in the group, that's one thing that I really appreciated about your Facebook page, is that people were coming back to your page after they took the test to give recent feedback. And I remember someone saying that they noticed the test was halfway over. And from that point on, that anxiety was building up about, getting through all the questions. And that happened to me as well. I looked at my clock at the top of my screen and I saw I'm halfway done, and I'm not halfway done through my questions. And then instead of using my calculator to double check as much, I didn't take the time to do that. And I felt like I rushed through a few questions where I shouldn't have had to, but it's because I was so careful in the beginning. And Robin, I think all of that comes down to confidence and
I agree.
being prepared. And I think having completed your class, I came into your class kind of okay with where I was, but then I looked at the first sheets that we were going to go through, and they were difficult. And I thought, I'm not prepared. And so I was so grateful that I had taken your, not only did I bought an extra one as well, I think, from you. Did you have two separate ones? Yeah. So I bought this second one because after the first one, I'm like, well, geez, if her questions are this hard and I had, difficulty answering number one, I really need to make sure I can get as much practice in as possible with as many problems as possible, so that going into the test, I was confident in myself. And like, just sitting and chatting with you gave me that confidence that I needed to go into the test. So
yeah, and that's what I think is really helpful. And I get asked a lot of questions about my practice tests. Like, is it exactly like the ETS practice test? No. Is it exactly like another person's practice test? No, because I wanted to create a different practice test so that if you do use the ETS site and another, it's Kathleen Jasper, she is a practice test as well, and then mine, you have 3 different variations of the practice test. And I always went into the mentality of making my questions as like, I'd rather them be more difficult so that you're more prepared, so that you're not going into the test like, oh my gosh, like this was way harder than I thought it would be. I'd rather you come back from the test being like, oh, that was super simple. So I appreciate you saying that as well. And I think also confidence when you're taking your test is something that I struggled with as well. And why I started helping with the Praxis is because I noticed my own students just in the secondary math setting, like they would be able to tell me how to do something. And then whenever they went to take a test, they were just like frozen in fear almost of like, afraid to make a mistake, afraid they didn't know what they were doing. So try to like build the confidence. And I think that you really came out of our classes confident and you were tackling everything that was thrown at you. So
I think getting your, after taking that class with you, I just was encouraged to go to get another test with different questions and work through some more problems. And that really helped me. Could I have done more? Yes. Could I have done better? Yes. But I passed with a huge margin, I feel.
Yeah, you did.
I think one of my flashcards, because throughout my study, so I used study.com as my main study platform. And the reason I like that is because it's AI based. And so it knows the areas that I was weak in, and it knows the areas that I was strong in. And I'd log in every day and it would say, okay, this is a quick win. Let's just skip this and move on to something that you're not quite there yet on. And so a lot of people would come on and say things like, well, you just need to memorize these questions and you need to memorize how to do this. You don't need to memorize anything. You need to understand what the question is asking. And then I think once you have that, that foundation of whatever topic that is, you're going to be able to answer any of those questions. But then you had such a variety of questions compared to what I had been seeing on study.com. And it was so different that it was so useful for me.
That's great. And did you do the study.com subscription then where you paid like a monthly fee?
Yep. And I'm still doing that now because I'm studying for the 5165 in December. Yeah.
Yes. And would you say the study.com questions were more computational, or did you think they were more like standardized testing based? Like, would you say that the questions asked you more like just how to do this, like very simple, or were they more, do you feel like they mirrored the Praxis tests as well too? Like, how did you feel about the questions?
I think it depended on the category. So it had very difficult statistics questions. But then I had read that study.com overall was easier on average than the actual Praxis test, which then that's kind of what caused me to reach out. Like, I need some more help here. And that's when I found you on Facebook. Because I do think study.com's questions I think they're more leading, like they lead you more. Is that what you say?
Yeah,
like,
that would make sense to me.
Stepping stools, for reaching an answer. Whereas like the actual Praxis was more of a black and white question with no leading to the answer going on.
Yeah, so. I would agree with that. Just from former students telling me that they have, different things that they have used, they had felt that way too. So I, wanted to make sure that I had questions that were, similar to that, because I would have students say like, oh, I've been using, there was another one too, study.com and something else that they were using, and they just didn't feel the rigor was independent on the category. Like you had said, the statistics problems were more difficult.
Yeah, they were definitely more difficult. It was study.com was fantastic for reviewing the foundations of a certain topic. So like a lot of other people mentioned the organic chemistry tutor, and I did use that a few times, but typically I didn't feel like I needed once I reviewed that, whatever topic it was, once I reviewed that lesson on study.com, but I just needed more questions on that topic,
And that's where I think also where I always say, for me, like I'm one person and these are my materials I have to use, but it's always good to go and look for other materials that you can use or other help and kind of have a combination of, resources to use. But I will say I feel like our Facebook group is a very special place to be, especially for the 5164, because there's no other Praxis test in there. No. Where people are asking questions like we had talked about on social studies or English. And that is definitely, I really love that group because it's just talking about the 5164.
It's a great group. And there's people that come back after they've taken the test, and you have current knowledge on, I knew going into it that it was functions driven, like that there was a lot of function, involved in the test itself. So I just really focused on that, as well as I just really tried to have a really good rounded idea based on everything I was reading that test was covering.
Yes. And another question that I kind of bounced back from this earlier, but the task of teaching questions, how were you on those questions on the test? Did you feel like there were a lot of them? How they were worded? Like, can you talk a little bit about those type of questions?
I think I've blocked that from my memory because I'm not good in that category at all. Like I could almost even studying, and there was nothing like that on study.com. So I came across that in your group, and I felt like I could always justify every answer,
Yes. That
and
is the trickiest part. And they're very difficult to come up with too. Like I use questions from my own students' experiences when we're going over topics, like where they make mistakes. And then I try to formulate a question based on that, or like error analysis. I try to do that. But there aren't a lot of questions to study from. I know I don't even know how many I would say I have altogether,
yeah.
maybe 20 or so, if not more. But those were tricky for you then, just the reading of them and understanding it.
Yes, it was very tricky for me to understand. Like sometimes I'm like, I have no idea how this student got to this answer. I really struggled in that. And there absolutely were also questions that I did not even understand what they were asking. Like one of them, I think I wrote to you about it. One of them was a dice question. And I still cannot remember what, I don't think I ever figured out what they were asking in that question. And it was a statistics question. I think I scored pretty high in statistics as well. So I don't think I ever even figured out what it was, what they were asking. I think it was if you rolled a dice this many times, what are your chances of getting a 3? And I don't remember. I'd have to go back and look at our messages.
Yeah, I think you said it was a fair dice question. And it read something like, what is the probability that the number when rolled twice will be greater than 4? I felt that it was so vague. Yeah, 2 out of 36 and 4 out of 36, which is 1/18, and none of the answers. Yeah. So I actually need to do that in one of my problem of the week, because you do have the 36 and then you need to count how many have a sum. See, that's where I think, did it say sum? Because if it was say, it didn't. Okay. Rolled twice will be greater than 4. Yeah, I need to look at that one and make a problem of the week question on that. And then you said, yeah, so I did look at that and I was like, well, if she said sum, that would make sense.
Right, but it did not say sum. And then there was another question where I had not come across it at all, and it had to do with, shading, which typically I'm pretty good at. I practiced so many of those problems, but then it used no numbers. It only had variables in the example, and I was lost. So I think I just didn't understand the question at all.
Yeah, and I would love
to maybe if more of a recent.
Yes, like to see a question like that, because when you're talking to me about it, I'm visualizing it, but I don't know how I would formulate a question to mirror that without actually like seeing it and understanding. So you're saying,
I would love to see it now. So that I could be like, oh yeah, that's what they were asking,
Only variables. Yeah, you said there were only variables, and the question said that the variables were whole numbers or integers.
Right.
And you had to choose an area which would be shaded.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that I would have to see that, but that's a really good idea for people. So
maybe you can like find somebody out who's recently taken it and ask if they got a question like that. And they probably were like, oh yeah, this was easy.
You know what? It's so interesting, I should say, to see where students think certain parts are easy and certain parts are difficult, because it always varies for one person or to the next. When I had my group tutoring in July, I believe, one of my students, she did 2 sessions with me, and she took her test, and she was able to go back and check her questions with her graphing calculator. And I need to reach out to her to do an interview with her as well, because I like her perspective on that. But her thing is that she was able to check everything with a graphing calculator at the end, and she didn't run out of time, where like time is such a big component for everyone that you really only have a couple minutes to answer each question before you run out of time. So you did say that you had run out of time, and then that those instances where you were like distracted because of you having to talk to the proctor also took time away from your tests as well.
Yeah, because I had to completely log out and then reboot my computer, which I have a new computer, so it boots pretty quickly. But then I had to get on, find go back to the ETS website, and then log back in, check in with the proctor, and then she let me back into the test. And I thought I was going to have to start all over, right? But I started back on the same question that I left off on. But I felt like, I just lost some time there, due to, some stress. But I definitely did not have time at the end. And then I get to the end, and the last thing I wanted to do was go back. It's a big test.
It is a big test.
You just have to be proficient in every category to get through it,
Yeah. Is there any, now we talked about like the function part and the task of teaching part. Were there any questions on there that surprised you? If you can remember that you were like, this is not really math. Like, were there some questions that kind of shocked you that you hadn't encountered through your studying, or were all the questions pretty much questions you have seen through all of your resources that you studied, or were there any on there that surprised you?
No, I think it was everything I had, expected, except for that one question where it just had variables. And then it was a very vague question. And I think probably if I had time to go back and think about it, but I did run out of time when I was on that question, because I did go back to that question. And I still just, I think I was, like the time I had 3 minutes left, and I'm like, what's the point? Just pick C,
Yeah.
But other than that, I think I expected everything, because whether it was through your Facebook group or the ETS practice test or study.com, I felt like I had really, looked over everything extensively. There were some things on there that were, or there were some things that were not on there that I expected that would be on there for sure. Like say standard deviation. I really expected a little bit more in that category, and it wasn't on there at all. Because it's several steps to get to a standard deviation, and and it wasn't on there. So I was glad.
Well, that is good, because there have been students of mine that have said there have been standard deviation problems on there. So I did include a standard deviation question in my practice booklet, but I think that was one of their test questions that they throw in there to see whether they're going to use it or not. Because they throw in, I say test questions are all test questions, but like sample questions that they may or may not use. And they seem to do that at the beginning of like every quarter. Usually the January tests, the April tests, et cetera, that they'll throw in a different question.
If only we could find somebody that works for Praxis that would join your group and give us information.
All the information. Yes. Yeah. And I will make that disclaimer. I do not work for ETS. I'm just a teacher trying to help as many people as I can with passing their Praxis.
I was grateful for your group, and I'm hopeful that when I have questions for 5165 that I can shoot you some questions.
Yes, most definitely can.
Yeah.
Most definitely can. Is there anything else you want to share with anybody about the test, or I did have one question and now I can't think of it. I was thinking of it when we were chit-chatting and I thought I need to ask her. How were the answer format choices? Were there a lot of multiple choice? Was it more fill in the blank, select all that apply, or would you say an even mixture amongst all those categories?
I would say there was more multiple choice and select all that apply, which I don't
Okay.
like those, right? Because you never know if you've
You
got
don't know
too
how many
many
to
or
select.
yeah, because
Yes.
like I said before, I can justify anything.
Yes.
I can make any answer correct,
Well, and
basically.
sometimes with the select
Yeah,
all that apply, all the answers are
are
it.
correct.
I mean, they are
Yes.
correct and you just don't know.
Yes. And then there were a few like click and drag,
Okay.
which I wasn't familiar with. There's none of that on study.com.
No, and I don't have any of that either on my practice test
Yeah.
because it's hard to
It's,
click and drag on a printable
yeah.
test version,
I mean, I think as long as you understand how to, answer
click
the
and drag.
question, it's pretty
Mhm.
simple. It's just click and drag.
Okay.
But most of them were just multiple choice.
Multiple choice.
Yeah.
Okay. And fill in the blank.
Yeah.
Did you have the light bulb question if you're familiar with what I'm asking? It is on the ETS practice test. And I believe, I think Kathleen Jasper, but it has like the light bulb question where it's like the light bulbs are like pink, orange, yellow, and blue. What's the probability that the 58th
Yeah,
light bulb, what color will it be? Did you have a question like that?
I did. Yeah. Find the
Okay.
nth number, right? Find the nth number.
Find the nth number. Yes, it's a sequence
Yes.
question. So I
Yep.
always get asked that question. Okay. So it
I
sounds like
did.
you had the pretty typical praxis test without any extra surprises, which is
Yes.
helpful. And
I wish that I could
nothing,
go back and see the ones that I did miss. I want to know what that one question was and functions that I missed,
I wish that you
So
were
it
able
would
to.
help a lot of people.
Yes, I think it would help a
Yeah.
lot of people too.
Yeah.
They're gatekeeping though on all the
Yes,
ones
they
that they
should.
have. They for sure
They should.
are. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you so much, Theresa. Do you have anything else you want to add? And I'm going to stop this, but you stay on so we can finish chatting for a few
Okay.
minutes. But is there anything else you want to add that would help anybody be a successful praxis exam taker with a great score like yours? Any
Yeah.
last minute information you want to share about test taking, prepping for the test, or what time of day you took the test, if you felt like that was helpful? Anything else?
Yeah, I did schedule it at 8:30 in the morning. Like I'm good right after my coffee. And I think the only thing is that like people may if anybody ever even questions what you charge for your class, when you think about how many times you're going to take that praxis exam and how much that costs to take it, it was worth every dollar for me to take that class, because not only did it review some of the test areas that I just needed to think about in a different light, and you had a completely different type of question. But it was also good to talk with the others in the class. Like I really enjoyed that as well. And then just walking out of that group setting and having the confidence that I needed from you to do as well as I did. I was surprised that I did as well as I did, because one of my flashcards, throughout my study over the past couple of weeks, I had flashcards with like, point slope form, standard form, all of these things. And one of my flashcards was a minimum 159. That was one of my flashcards. And I just blew that out of the water.
Yes,
So
you did.
I was
And
happy, and I do attribute that to just the confidence that you gave me in the questions that you provided in the 2 separate tests that I bought. And then in your class was beyond helpful.
I appreciate you saying that. That is,
Yeah.
I love the classes that we do together. And I just think that is, I didn't offer that until this year. This year was the first year I started that. I had always done one-to-one tutoring. And then I ran a boot camp in January of this year. And I loved the collaborative aspect
Yes.
of that. And I learned so much from the students in the class as well. And the teachers,
Yeah.
and just having people say, oh, I did it this way, or I did it that way. And that has helped me a lot too. And I think that was such a valuable asset to have from not only the questions I was providing you, but how different people were answering them, and especially the calculator techniques as well, like how to put it in your calculator, how to work the TI-83 online, because a lot of us have our handheld favorites, and whenever
Yes.
you have to put it in the computer, it's a whole different ball game.
Right. And I think knowing, that's another thing that we haven't talked about, is using that calculator and being so confident in, you can check any X value, you can check any Y value. If it had the apps loaded, you could have it tell you what your
Yes, those
what your
apps.
zeros are.
Right. We need those
But
apps.
there are no apps loaded. So you do need to make sure that you can do, second trace functions, and you can do, any of that. So knowing your calculator and how to, go backdoor on a lot of those functions was crucial for me, I think.
Perfect.
But we used that a lot in class. So I got
Yes.
I got very proficient in using that calculator in class.
Yeah, that is wonderful. Well, thank you so
Yeah.
much, Theresa. I value your input, and I know it's going to help a lot of the other students in the group that are taking their Praxis 5164 test. And you'll stay on, and I will log off. But thank you, everybody, for joining us today, and I will see you soon with our next Praxis success story.